a Bexar County grand jury indicted a couple in connection with a deadly pit bull attack that took place on February the 24th of 2023. The couple, Christian Alexander Moreno and Abilene Schneider, both aged 31, had been arrested after two of their dogs escaped their fenced yard in San Antonio and attacked 81-year-old Ramon Nahira Jr. The dogs also injured the victim's wife, 74-year-old Juanita Nahira. The Nahiras were mauled when they tried to visit the home of a friend who lived next door to Moreno and Schneider's residence in the 2800 block of Depler Street. 3 dogs escaped the couple's fenced yard, but only 2 of the animals attacked the elderly couple, while the third ran loose in the street. One of the dogs relentlessly bit Ramon, tearing off parts of his clothes, then ripping a dialysis shunt out of his body as he yelled for help and tried desperately to get away. The other dog stood nearby in the street, barking loudly, its face and neck stained with blood, not allowing witnesses to get close. Neighbors tried to fend off the hounds with a rake, a gushing hose, and a car horn, but none of those efforts stopped the attack. Before the dogs were contained, they attacked 2 more individuals. Eventually, all 3 dogs, described as American Staffordshire Terriers, were captured and euthanized by San Antonio Animal Care Services. The attack took the life of Ramon, with Juanita and other victims taken to the hospital and later being released. In August of 2023, Moreno and Schneider were charged with dangerous dog attacks causing death and recklessly causing injury to an elderly person. Subsequent information indicated that they were given until March of 2024 to accept a plea deal to avoid going to trial. Number 14. Jacqueline Durand. Dog sitter Jacqueline Durand, whose face was ripped off in a savage 800-bite mauling that took place at a home in Dallas, Texas, later shared the amazing results of her reconstructive surgery. The mauling transpired on December the 23rd of 2021, when 21-year-old Durand was about to look after 2 rescue dogs. One of the canines was a pit bull mix, while the other was a German shepherd. Durand had been hired by Ashley Joe Bishop and Justin Avery Bishop. Upon Durand's arrival at the residence, she was immediately pinned down by the bloodthirsty dogs and dragged through the corridor and into the living room. Her nose, ears, lips, and cheeks were injured, leaving her in a medically induced coma. After her recovery, Durand said that when she felt the skin hanging from her face, she thought she was going to die. She also said that the attack lasted half an hour before police arrived. Responding officers only discovered the victim after an alarm had been triggered by the front door being left open. The officers managed to get Durand to safety, and she was then rushed to the trauma ward, where she underwent a 7-hour-long emergency surgery just to survive. Durand later underwent 18 surgeries to rebuild her face. In 2023, she revealed the incredible outcome of her intense facial reconstruction surgeries to raise awareness about the dangers of dogs. Sharing her inspirational story online, Durand explained that doctors first took a skin graft from her buttocks and forehead to begin the reconstruction process. Her nose was then rebuilt using skin from near her hairline, and her lip was remade from skin on her left thigh. She told her followers on TikTok that it was a long road to recovery, but she was doing all right and was progressing. Durand also filed a lawsuit against the Bishops in January of 2022, demanding a jury trial and seeking over $1 million in damages. Despite that lawsuit having been filed almost 2 years ago, as of the making of this video, its outcome is still unclear. Scott B. A man identified only as Scott B. from Atlanta, Georgia, made a trip to his hunting stand north of Jefferson, where he was later attacked by 3 dogs and left with nearly 300 wounds. The harrowing incident unfolded on January the 15th of 2023, when the 61-year-old was moving his hunting stand on property he'd leased. Moments later, he was approached by 1 dog, which immediately attacked him, upon which 2 others joined in. The dogs were attacking with a wolf mentality and were in a complete frenzy. According to Scott, He also said that he was unarmed at the time and had left his cell phone on his vehicle, which was 150 yards away from his ladder stand. The mauling transpired for about 15 minutes before the man was able to grab a large stick and use it to fight off the hounds. He then moved toward another ladder stand where he climbed to safety. After a half hour, Scott attempted to leave, however the dogs still tried to chase him. At that point, he decided to stay put for the time being. Eventually, Scott managed to run safely to the highway where he yelled out for help to a passing car. He was subsequently taken to the emergency room where he received treatment for puncture wounds and a severed ligament. Scott needed stitches in 7 different parts of his body and was later released. The 3 dogs, 2 of which resembled pit bulls and the other, a German shepherd, were recovered and put into a 10-day rabies quarantine. On February the 3rd, the dogs were put down and the female owner received citations for having the dangerous animals. Number 12. Trinity Rowles. My dad's dog bit off my nose. Now I have hair growing on my face, according to Trinity Rowles after undergoing surgery and recovering from a 100-pound pit bull attack suffered by her father's rescue dog. The 20-year-old had been mauled by the dog, Irish, on September the 9th of 2022 at her father's Pennsylvania home. Rowles said that on the day of the attack she had been arguing with her father, creating a heated environment which may have triggered the attack. Rowles added that the dog, which the family referred to as a great big teddy bear, unexpectedly sunk its teeth into her arms and pulled her around like playing a game of tug-of-war before ripping off the end of her nose. Rowles' father quickly responded and placed her in the fetal position while trying to protect her as much as he could. But Irish kept trying to get at the woman and continued to bite her. Rowles further stated that suddenly, like the flick of a switch, Irish just walked away and sat on the porch stairs. Emergency services were immediately called, and as they arrived, they put the victim on a stretcher. Rowles remembered hearing her father telling someone to handle the dog. He shouted, "Just do it!" before the sound of gunshots rang. She was taken to Holy Spirit Hospital and then transferred to Penn State Hershey Medical Center. Due to the severity of her injuries, she received treatment for the most pressing injuries over the course of 4 days before doctors started focusing on her nose reconstruction. Rowles subsequently had 4 surgeries, including a skin graft made from skin from her forehead and scalp, which meant the skin on her nose grew hair. Number 11. Jordan Callender. Englishman Jordan Callender was jailed over a frenzied attack carried out by his 2 XL bullies on another dog, leaving his owner covered in blood and fur. The 26-year-old was walking his dogs named Zeus and Thor in Stretford, UK, on the night of March the 6th of 2022, when they came across another dog and its owner. The owner of the husky dog named Samson, also out for a walk, said the 2 animals immediately charged at his dog, sniffing him before biting his head and back. In a witness statement read out by prosecutor Gareth Hughes at Manchester Magistrates Court, the owner said he tried to swing Samson around on his lead, but it then slipped off it and the dog tried to run back home with the other 2 dogs chasing him. He eventually caught up with them and picked Samson up before trying to run away. However, the 2 XL bully dogs pulled them both to the floor. The owner described the dogs as being hell-bent in their attack. He also added that one resident in the area came out with a tennis racket to try to intervene, but the dog still had hold of his husky. The resident picked the husky up and put him inside a closed gate, but he was then bitten in that process as well. The court heard how the 2 dogs, Zeus and Thor, consequently tried to get over the gate, with their owner saying that they were trying to finish what they started. An ambulance was called and the victims were taken to Manchester Royal Infirmary for x-rays and a tetanus vaccination. The owner was left with bite marks on his right hand and grazing on his knees. Fortunately, the victims, including Samson, survived the attack. Following the incident, Zeus and Thor were taken into police kennels at a cost of more than $5,000, and the latter was later euthanized due to an illness. Callender, who had previous convictions for dangerous driving and aggravated vehicle taking, pleaded guilty to owning dogs that were dangerously out of control in a public place, causing injury. District Judge Jane Hamilton ordered the destruction of the surviving dog and sentenced Callender to 4 months in prison. Additionally, Hamilton disqualified Callender from owning a dog for 5 years. The man was also ordered to pay $190 in compensation to both victims. Number 10. Kate Jackson. 35-year-old Kate Jackson, whose dog was attacked by an XL bully in Liverpool's Sefton Park, said she was 100% against plans to ban the breed. The attack took place shortly before 10 a.m. on July the 25th of 2023, while Jackson was walking her 10-month-old Hungarian Vizsla, Arthur. Jackson came across a man with 2 dogs, one of which she believed to be an XL bully. She said that the owner of the 2 dogs told her they're not friendly. Just moments before the XL bully grabbed Arthur by the neck before the woman could do anything, the bully had her dog by the throat and was dragging it. The man was shouting at his bully, but to no effect. The other, smaller dog subsequently joined in and was biting and pulling Arthur's ears, causing him to whimper. The 2 dog owners managed to separate the canines, and at that point, a verbal altercation briefly ensued between them. Jackson later took her dog to the emergency vet, where it was given 17 stitches to close a deep laceration to its neck. Arthur also had a puncture wound and injuries to his ear. The treatment cost Jackson at least $2,100. Jackson contacted Merseyside police following the incident, but investigating officers have decided to take no further action. She said she planned to submit a complaint to the force in the future, but didn't explain further as to why, despite her scary ordeal, she was still against a ban on the breed. Number 9. Colombian woman. In March of 2022, the New York Post reported about a viral video that captured a Colombian woman trying to escape from a horrific attack carried out by a pit bull. The ordeal took place inside an elevator in the woman's Cucuta apartment building. While the unnamed woman was putting on her shoes in her bedroom, a pit bull entered the bedroom and started attacking her. It was unclear why the 4-year-old dog started its attack, and it's even unclear who the dog belonged to, with some media outlets reporting it was her own dog and others claiming it belonged to someone else. After the animal jumped on the woman, she tried to flee to the hallway for help. Nobody came to her aid, and she managed to get into the elevator, but the dog followed her into it and continued the onslaught. The 25-year-old was in the clutches of the crazed animal, which she desperately tried to fight off in the cramped space. The bloodied woman was seen being mauled by the dog, which shook its head violently with its jaws latched onto her arm. The beast also bit her in the neck and legs before she was seen pressing a button to take the elevator to the lobby. At one point, the animal was seen dragging her out of the lift. Upon reaching the lobby, people finally rushed to the woman's aid and took her to Erasmo Mioes University Hospital. The woman had to undergo a medical procedure for her fractured fingers and wounds. In the aftermath, authorities seized the animal and held it for a behavioral analysis. It was unclear if any charges were made in connection with the incident. Number 8. Joanne Robinson. The mother of an English woman mauled to death by her own pet dog at her Rotherham home said she warned her daughter something bad was going to happen 2 weeks before she died. 43-year-old Joanne Robinson had been fatally attacked by her American Bully XL dog after it allegedly turned mad in the extreme heat in July of 2022. Joanne died at the scene of the attack at her residence, while her partner, Jamie Steed, was left with injuries to his hands, stomach, and face as he tried to pull the animal off her. Joanne's mother, Dot, said her daughter had tried to do everything right, but her 18-month-old dog was simply too big and strong. She said that the dog in question had fought with Joanne's other pet dog on several instances, upon which she warned Joanne to get rid of one of them. In the wake of Joanne's death, both dogs were destroyed. Number 7. Nicholas Vasquez. The owners of 3 dogs involved in a brutal attack that killed 51-year-old Nicholas Vasquez were charged under the Texas felony dog attack statute. The vicious attack unfolded on June the 9th of 2022 near the intersection of Harvard Road and Knoll Lane in Houston. Vasquez had been walking home from the grocery store when a group of canines charged at him at full speed. A neighbor found the victim in a ditch, partially eaten alive and moaning after having tried to fight off the dogs. Vasquez underwent multiple limb amputations before dying from organ failure on June the 19th. The dogs were identified as 3 large pit bulls and were found covered in blood. They were seized by Harris County Animal Control following the incident. Investigators determined that there was a hole in the owner's fence from which the dogs had escaped. Harris County court records indicated that the estate of Vasquez filed a civil claim against the owners, Tabitha and Matthew Satchel, seeking damages of over $200,000. The causes of action included negligence and wrongful death. In May of 2023, the family lawyers reportedly obtained a settlement on behalf of Vasquez's estate. The amount, however, wasn't disclosed. Number 6. Stephanie Jones. In April of 2021, Welshwoman Stephanie Jones bought an American bully from an unlicensed breeder and was later bitten by the pup 25 times. The 32-year-old said that she should have spotted the red flags when she bought the bully Pit, which she named Chase. When she arrived to collect the 10-week-old puppy, she was refused entry into the breeder's home. However, Jones, who lived near Swansea, persisted and bought the pup for nearly $4,000. The breeder promised to send all the paperwork through the mail, but Jones never received anything. After taking Chase home, Jones noticed a large scar on his ear. She contacted the breeder and questioned him on the matter. The man replied saying it must have been done by the dog's mother. But when Jones tried to ask questions about the outstanding paperwork and the proof of his license to breed, he threatened her via voicemail saying he knew where she lived. Jones later found out that the breeder was purportedly unlicensed. A few months later, Chase attacked Jones's Cavalier King Charles Spaniel. Then in August of 2021, he went for another family dog in front of Jones's young children. The mother intervened and grabbed Chase's collar, at which point she was mauled by Chase, who was 6 months old at the time. Jones was taken to a hospital and Chase was put to sleep. Number 5. Ian Langley. Shortly before 7 p.m. on October the 4th of 2023, authorities received a report that a dog had injured a man on Maple Terrace in Houghton-le-Spring, England. Responding emergency services arrived at the scene and attended the victim. Ian Langley, the 54-year-old, had been walking his Patterdale Terrier pup in a village called Shiny Row when an XL bully struck him. The dog grabbed him by the neck as he bent down to pick up his pup. The mauling left Langley needing CPR for around 15 minutes as emergency services fought to staunch heavy bleeding from his wounds. Responding officers arrived at the scene and put the bully down to ensure the safety of the public. They spoke to the 44-year-old owner and seized a second dog from his address. As a precaution, Langley's pup ran away during the attack, but was later recovered and unharmed. The day after the attack, Langley succumbed to his injuries. As of the latest updates, the owner of the bully was arrested on suspicion of murder, and a murder probe was launched. Number 4. Katie Deary. 31-year-old Englishwoman Katie Deary had to endure a 5-hour surgery on both of her arms, including 50 stitches, and the repair of her left finger, which was partially amputated after a canine attack. Deary was out walking her dog on August the 17th of 2023, along with her daughter, who was in a pushchair, when she spotted a loose dog, later identified as an XL bully, from across the street on Doncaster Road in Askern. She became worried about its demeanor. Deary immediately picked up her pet dog and carried on walking. But before she knew it, The XL bully ran across the road and leapt towards her, gripping onto her arm. Meanwhile, Deary's dog jumped out of her arms and ran away, with the XL bully then shifting its attention to Deary and her daughter. A man only identified as Stephen, who'd witnessed the incident from the road, jumped out of his truck and ran to Deary's direction to help. The woman tried to push the pram towards Stephen and asked him to get her daughter to safety. In an act of incredible bravery, Stephen managed to pull the dog off Deary and free her arm before calling an ambulance. Deary, who was pouring blood, was taken by responding paramedics to Northern General Hospital. The injuries she suffered had left her unable to feed or dress herself or her toddler in the aftermath of her surgery. In the wake of the incident, the XL bully was seized by law enforcement and ultimately destroyed. Speaking of this, Deary said that she was an animal lover and didn't wish for any creature to be destroyed. She added that, however, if a dog attacked a child, then that dog should be killed. Number 3. Clevie Nelson and Tyler Marchese. On November the 22nd of 2022, a judge ruled to terminate 3 pit bulls that had caused serious bodily injuries on 3 individuals at a trailer park complex in El Paso, Texas. The attack had taken place at the Heritage Park in northeast El Paso on November the 9th, when 3 pit bulls managed to get loose. It was unclear how the dogs had escaped from the area where they had been held, but when they did, they immediately attacked an elderly resident in the area. The victim's neighbor, Clevie Nelson, stepped in and tried to help, but the dogs were relentless and also started biting her. The 2 women screamed in pain and were heard by another neighbor by the name of Tyler Marchese. The man immediately took off barefoot from his home and attempted to save the woman. At that point, all 3 neighbors were now being mauled by the canines. Fortunately, the elderly woman managed to get into a safe place while Nelson and Marchese continued fighting until they got to a higher place where they couldn't get bitten. The 3 victims were taken to the hospital where they were treated for injuries. In the immediate aftermath, the dogs were taken into custody by El Paso Animal Services and placed under a 10-day quarantine. Marchese, who'd suffered injuries to his face, arms and legs, said that the dog owner should realize the pain that the incident had caused their neighborhood. Nelson, who'd sustained injuries to her legs, right ankle, and hand, stated that the same pit bulls had escaped before. She said they'd been reported, but nothing had been done. Officials with Animal Services provided witness testimonies during a hearing in connection with the incident, which ultimately led to the court's final decision to put the 3 pit bulls down. Today's topic was requested by True Crime Queen 75, Jackal 5892, and Martha Felix 3910. If you have any other topics you'd like to learn about, subscribe and let us know in the comment section below. Number 2. Natasha Johnston. A dog walker died after suffering massive blood loss caused by multiple bites to the neck while she was out with a pack of dogs at a park in Caterham, England. Natasha Johnston was purportedly experienced in walking dogs. However, while the 28-year-old was handling 8 canines at around 2:30 p.m. on January the 12th of 2023 at Gravely Hill Common Park, the pack pounced on her for some reason. A witness said that Johnston was screaming and shouting as she was being swamped by the dogs, mauling at her and pulling her arms and sides. The witness added that surprisingly there was no barking. The witness further stated that when she was approaching, Johnston spotted her and yelled, "Turn back, turn back." The woman was pronounced dead at the scene at around 3 p.m. When police responded, they recovered the dogs. They also determined that there was another woman who'd been attacked and bitten by one of the dogs. She was taken to the hospital with non-life-threatening injuries. The official cause of Johnston's death was later revealed to be shock and hemorrhage following the perforation of the left jugular vein. It was believed that the dog that inflicted the fatal wounds was Natasha's own American Bully XL, which was consequently put down in the wake of the incident. 2 of their dogs were returned to their owners while the remaining 5 were placed in private kennels. Among the pack that Johnston was walking that day was a Leonberger named Shiva. The dog had previously appeared in a 2017 BBC program about bad puppy behavior, during which the owner shared that the dog earned its name because it was so unruly. In the end, no prosecutions were brought against any individuals. Another previous but no less intriguing episode about when keeping exotic pets goes wrong is lined up for you right after number 1. Stick around if you'd like. Number 1. Lacadia Reynolds. On June the 6th of 2023, Englishwoman Lacadia Reynolds was strolling along Abbots Park in Lambeth, South London, when 3 dogs attacked her. 2 of the dogs, which were off their leads, had come up to the 24-year-old as she was walking. The owner of the 2 dogs approached while having a 3rd dog that was on a lead. Reynolds asked the owner to take the 2 dogs away from her, and the man instructed them to do so. However, they didn't react to his instructions. Instead, they jumped up and started attacking Reynolds, biting and scratching her skin. The owner couldn't get the dogs off of the woman and even started to ask for help. The 3rd dog subsequently joined in the mauling, causing Reynolds to fall to the ground and scream out. The dog surrounded her and continued pouncing at her. The terrifying attack lasted several minutes as bystanders witnessed from a distance. One of the witnesses even filmed the attack, and the footage would later go viral. Reynolds didn't get any help, but she was able to escape by pulling off her hoodie. A law enforcement vehicle which happened to be nearby took her to a hospital. The attack left the victim with nerve and muscle damage, as well as a lip injury, an arm injury, and scratches and bites on her legs. She also suffered nerve damage to one of her arms that doctors didn't know she would ever recover from. In an interview with Leading Britain's Conversation, Reynolds said that her arm wound was really deep and that she could actually see fat and underlying structures in it. In the aftermath, authorities investigated and determined that the 2 dogs were XL bullies and the 3rd dog was an American Pit Bull Terrier. At the time, the latter was a prohibited type under the United Kingdom's Dangerous Dogs Act. The police said that the owner was informed and decided to give up ownership. Since the dog was a banned breed and a risk to the public, combined with the fact that the woman had already sustained a serious injury, the dog was euthanized. The other dogs remained in police kennels while further inquiries were carried out. Number 10. Unnamed Czech filmmaker. In 2014, the member of a film crew was attacked by a pet lion in the Czech Republic while shooting a documentary at the owner's home. 53-year-old SS Basista was living with 2 adult lions, Alex and Mijanka, which he'd raised since they were cubs. Basista received constant complaints from his neighbors, who described the felines as killers. Nevertheless, he and his family maintained they weren't aggressive. Alex and Mijanka were allowed to roam freely around the house, and Basista would often join them in their rough and tumble antics. As the production crew arrived at their home in Stupava, Mijanka was wandering around the living room. Suddenly, she pounced on the back of a filmmaker and sank her claws into his flesh. The owners were on standby and, after a brief struggle, managed to wrestle her away. The filmmaker sustained minor flesh wounds. Even though it would have taken mere seconds for Mijanka to inflict critical injuries, Basista insisted that she was only playing. Number 9. Austin Hatfield. Florida teenager Austin Hatfield found a cottonmouth near his Wimorma home in 2014 and decided that it would be his new pet. Even though the snake possessed a deadly venomous bite, 18-year-old Hatfield kept it in a pillowcase in his room. According to his best friend, Jason Belcher, the teenager would kiss the snake on its head and mouth, completely disregarding the dangers to which he was exposing himself. Cottonmouths are known to be somewhat skittish in nature, but will readily defend themselves if they feel threatened. On a Saturday night, the snake slithered out of the pillowcase, across Hatfield's stomach and off the bed. As the teen tried to recapture it, he was bitten. Belcher was in the kitchen when Hatfield walked in and asked to be taken to the hospital immediately. He was in critical condition on arrival, but was treated with antivenom and eventually stabilized. It was reportedly illegal for Hatfield to have the cottonmouth at his home, since keeping venomous snakes require special permits. Number 8. Vladimir. In 2015, a 21-year-old Russian man identified by his first name as Vladimir was killed by the king cobra he'd kept as a pet. The incident took place at the man's apartment in the city of Togliatti. It was there that, aside from the cobra, Vladimir also kept a green mamba and a red spitting cobra. His social media featured numerous pictures of him and his venomous pets. His girlfriend, Anna, claimed that he'd like to play with the snakes and wasn't afraid of them. She was in the apartment when Vladimir was bitten by the cobra. The animal had reportedly attacked him as he was trying to feed it. Anna immediately called an ambulance, but there was nothing more that the paramedics could do for him when they arrived at the residence. Within minutes of the bite, Vladimir had passed away in Anna's arms. Number 7. Mikhail Prasek. 33-year-old Mikhail Prasek kept 2 lions, a male and a female, in the back of his home in the village of Zdekov, Czech Republic. He didn't have a license for the animals, which he'd been breeding illegally and housing in cages of his own design. In spite of multiple fines and concerns expressed by local residents, Prasek refused to relocate his exotic pets or to allow anyone representing local authorities onto his property. They were at an impasse because there was no evidence of animal cruelty, and keeping the lions wasn't outright illegal due to a lack of alternative facilities in the country. Prasek made headlines in 2018 when he was out walking his lioness on a leash and a cyclist crashed into it. The cyclist suffered some scratches that required treatment, and local authorities at the time deemed it a traffic accident. In 2019, Prasek's father found him in the pen of his 9-year-old male lion. He had been fatally mauled and the pen was reportedly locked from the inside. Police were called to the scene and shot both lions, an action they deemed had been absolutely necessary in order for them to retrieve Prasek's body. A local news outlet reported that the lioness was pregnant at the time. Number 6. Dean Armstrong. In August of 2012, a man from Cambridge, England, nearly died after he was stung by his pet scorpion. Dean Armstrong had grown up surrounded by exotic animals, as his father had owned a zoo in the 1960s. Since his late teens, Armstrong had started his own collection of reptiles and arachnids. He was in his early 40s when he got Sue the scorpion from a local pet shop. The owners had had trouble selling her because she only had one pincer, which meant that she struggled to hold food. Armstrong was trying to feed her a cricket when Sue whipped her tail over. The man had been stung or bitten by his pets numerous times, but remembered at that moment feeling fear for the first time. Within a minute of being stung, Armstrong collapsed. Fortunately, he was almost immediately discovered by his cleaner, who called the emergency services. He was rushed to Whipps Cross Hospital in East London, where he received a blood transfusion meant to flush the venom out of his system. When he woke up, he was paralyzed on the right side of his body and he couldn't speak. Armstrong was relieved about an hour later when the effect had passed, not knowing that it was only the beginning of his ordeal. The venom had severely damaged his pancreas, and weeks later, he was in surgery to have the organ drained of the toxins. Another year passed before he suffered further complications from the initial sting, when a cyst broke in his stomach and he started vomiting blood. Armstrong underwent life-saving surgery. When he came to, doctors told him that they'd removed his stomach, gallbladder, half his pancreas, and some intestines. Even though he'd have to carry a colostomy bag around for the rest of his life, Armstrong felt fortunate to have survived. Number 5. Sharon Miller. In the late 1990s, Sharon Miller purchased a tarantula that her 8-year-old daughter had wanted from a Lake Forest pet shop in California. Miller knew that it could bite, but that the venom, barring a severe allergic reaction, generally had very low toxicity towards humans. However, she was completely unaware of a second and arguably more effective defensive response. The woman reached into the spider's cage to clean it, but suddenly felt discomfort in her eyes. As she rubbed them, they became red and extremely painful. She compared the sensation to having burning grains of sand in her eyes. What the pet store had reportedly failed to tell her was that when faced with larger attackers, tarantulas will flick their hind legs forward and fling hairs from their abdomen into the air. The arachnids can be quite precise in directing their attack. Their hairs aren't soft, but more like minuscule barbs that are meant to affect their target's sight. Miller was left with blurred vision after several of the tarantula's hairs got lodged in her right eye. She subsequently sued the pet shop for medical expenses and emotional distress, arguing that they'd failed to warn her about the dangers of owning the exotic pet. Number 4. Norman Buwalda. In 2010, Norman Buwalda, chairman of the Canadian Exotic Animal Owners Association, was fatally mauled by a massive tiger he'd kept at his property in Southwold, Ontario. Nobody witnessed the attack, which claimed 66-year-old Buwalda's life. A family member who'd found his mangled remains was able to lock the 650-pound Siberian male in a separate portion of the cage. When officers arrived at the scene, it was visibly agitated, pacing back and forth in its enclosure. It hadn't been the first attack to occur on Buwalda's property. A few years prior, in 2004, a person from Toronto suffered severe head and neck injuries after being mauled by one of his tigers. They survived and recovered with treatment. Southwold's deputy mayor told a media outlet that the township had lost a case that would have forced Buwalda to get rid of his exotic pets. In a dark, ironic twist, one of the animals that he'd fought so hard to keep ultimately ended his life. The fate of the tiger remains unclear. Number 3. Daniel Brandon. On August the 25th of 2017, Englishman Daniel Brandon was killed by his pet African rock python at his family's home near Basingstoke in North Hampshire. The 31-year-old had owned the 8-foot serpent, named Tiny, since she was small enough to fit in his hand. In the wild, an African rock python will use its formidable strength to constrict antelopes, monkeys, and even small crocodiles, which it then devours whole. Brandon kept several other snakes and was never scared of Tiny, according to his mother. However, she reported that the snake would sometimes lash out at her when she entered the room. On the night of Brandon's death, the woman remembered a thud coming from his room, but thought that he'd knocked something over or dropped a piece of fitness equipment. She later found him unresponsive and Tiny coiled under a cabinet. A coroner ruled without doubt that Brandon had died from asphyxiation following contact with the python. Number 2. Soichiro Mori. In 2018, a Japanese man was mauled to death by the Asian black bear he'd been hired to care for. 56-year-old Soichiro Mori had gone to the residence located northeast of Tokyo. It was there that the bear's owner, an unnamed 70-year-old man, was keeping it in an enclosure. Based on the reports of local authorities, he had the necessary permits for the bear, which stood at 4 foot 2 inches and weighed an estimated 110 pounds. Mori, who was the animal's caretaker, had entered the cage, but before long, a neighbor heard him screaming. The neighbor went to the house and found Mori severely mauled in the animal's enclosure. He was taken to the hospital, where he was later pronounced dead. Number 1. Paul and Mandy McDonald. In 2019, an Australian couple was brutally attacked by a deer that kept at their farm in Moihu, northeast Victoria. 47-year-old Paul McDonald was feeding the wapiti, a cross between a red deer and an elk, when it unexpectedly lunged at him. His wife, 45-year-old Mandy, intervened, but sustained devastating injuries to her leg and upper body. Their teenage son witnessed the incident and ran to get help. Police officers arrived at the scene and fatally shot the deer. Mandy survived, but Paul had been gored to death. The woman was flown to the Alfred Hospital in critical condition, and according to updates on her case, she required over a dozen surgeries on a long road to recovery. In the aftermath of the attack, wildlife authorities warned that male deer, even though they may seem docile the rest of the year, become aggressive come mating season. Thanks for watching. Would you rather be trapped in an elevator with one angry XL bully or with 20 bloodthirsty chihuahuas? Let us know in the comments section below.